In America, the narrative is that Walt Disney revolutionized film by making the first animated feature Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in 1937. In reality, this is only partially correct. Snow White does deserve some credit as the first English-language animated film, the first in color, and the first to be hand-drawn. But across the world, in the most unexpected places, other animated features have been made using the oldest film medium, stop motion. While Adventures of Prince Ahmed, The New Gulliver, and Le Roman de Renard are still viewable, the topic of this video is a movie you cannot see anywhere. It is the work of an unusual character in the world of early film, and a testament to the ephemeral nature of art. This is the story of El Apostol. Every story needs a main character, and ours is Quirino Cristiani. Born in Italy in 1896, Cristiani immigrated to Argentina at the age of 4. Expecting a third world backwater, he was instead greeted with the cosmopolitan and innovative city of Buenos Aires, and fell in love right away. While in school, he focused his efforts on 2 fields of study: leftist politics and animation. Cristiani specialized in cutout animation, a form of stop motion utilizing paper puppets on a flat surface and cutting the footage together to emulate movement. While primitive, it was all he had at this time. Soon he met producer and fellow immigrant Federico Valle and started making shorts for his company. After the shorts became successful, Cristiani and Valle decided to go big. So they made an animated work combining satire with artistry and comedic timing. Hence the movie El Apostol. By our most reliable estimates and eyewitness testimony, El Apostol is the first ever animated feature film. Screened in 1917, it beats Snow White to the punch by about 20 years. Cristiani and a team of 7 other artists pulled together a film with 12,000 frames in less than a year. Why and how he was able to direct such a long feature when most of the world had no access to long-form animation, we do not know. But Cristiani did the unthinkable and gifted the world with the first animated feature. Anyone who works in animation knows it's not easy to have so many frames together, and it took thousands of man-hours in blood, sweat, and tears. Yet Cristiani still had enough motivation to see it through. El Apostol was intended as a satire of then-president of Argentina, Hipólito Yrigoyen. So let's talk about him now. Like Cristiani, Yrigoyen was a leftist. He founded the Radical Party, a populist campaign which sought an end to oligarchic rule and championed the poor. This unorthodox liberal approach made him a political apostle, hence the title of Cristiani's film. While charismatic and well-meaning, he did not seem to be effective in executing his policies. Though he passed many workers' rights laws, he also used military repression and imposed censorship to limit the rights of those same workers. Yrigoyen's fear of Americanization, while also not wanting to disengage the pro-American populace, meant he remained neutral in World War I, a massively unpopular move. Most of his ideas would shape South America during the World Wars and Great Depression, though in leading the country he would radicalize both sides of the population further, leading to a controversial regime. He would be ousted in a bloodless coup during his second term in 1930. But this story is about what went down in his first term. As a civic radical, most of his ideas were a fantasy. Despite having a focus on rule of law and bringing his wishes down on people, Yrigoyen was still a man, and Cristiani's movie called him out on his god delusion. The synopsis of this movie is only known through production stills and newspaper clippings, but we have a bare bones of it. In the film, Yrigoyen wants to rid Argentina of corruption, so he ascends to Mount Olympus in the garb of a Roman apostle. His outfit would seem blasphemous to a viewer of the time, and indeed it would show the blasphemy Yrigoyen was committing. In the heavens, he meets with Jupiter to strike a lightning bolt on the ravaged country and build another on its ruins. It was this scene in particular which captivated audiences, as Cristiani broke form for it. He built a scale model of Buenos Aires and actually lit it on fire. Such technical wizardry is commonplace today, but had almost never been tried before. Alas, the film ends with Yrigoyen waking up from his dream, realizing he has to face corruption in Argentina on his own. Reviews at the time were favorable, depicting a man who was a friend of the people as a violent heretic was quite the twist for YRIGOYEN's media portrayal. In holding truth to power, the film does not deny the corruption in Argentina and rivalry from conservatives, but also paints YRIGOYEN as weak and ineffectual. Cristiani took to film what any satirist does best: make fun of everyone without bias or selectiveness getting in the way of the satire. Audiences could laugh at the movie without thinking if it was pro or anti-YRIGOYEN, because the joke would have worked either way. And the story, while simple, is effective enough to capture your attention and keep going for 70 minutes. Must have been a riot watching this back in the day. Though if you are to know about the work of Cristiani, you must also be aware of Dehne's Taborda. Like Cristiani, Taborda was a satirist. He made his art crude and rough around the edges for a purpose, which was to make more people laugh at the work in question. When people went to the movie, they would come for him. Taborda created the cutout puppets, and Cristiani would take them under the light and put the puppets in motion. When the film premiered, Cristiani's accomplishments again went underdeveloped, as he was only credited as a supervising animator and director. As such, it was Taborda who took most of the credit for this movie, not Cristiani. The reason you may not have heard of this film is in part because of lack of access. Foreign distribution in 1917 was not what it was today. Despite good reviews, no theaters outside Buenos Aires had access to it, and little incentive was made to screen it elsewhere for fear of causing an uproar. YRIGOYEN himself was not too keen on the satire and ordered the film banned within a year. Even though the film was not lost yet, nobody could ever see it again after its initial release. Valle's conservative strategy and the funds necessary to make the movie rendered it essentially a flop. Censorship and technical limitations kept the word from getting out, and El Apostol, despite its accomplishments, was too obscure to even register in the history books for now. The only known copy of El Apostol was destroyed in a studio fire in 1926. In a cruel irony, this was the same year when, far away in Germany, The Adventures of Prince Ahmed premiered. This movie has taken El Apostol's place as the oldest surviving animated feature, as well as the first to be directed by a woman, Lotte Reiniger. Even when The Adventures of Prince Ahmed premiered in 1926, perception of the time was that it was the first animated feature, as few had seen anything like it before. Even then, El Apostol was unknown. In fact, it was not until a 1970 animation festival in Berlin when film historians were able to verify El Apostol as the oldest animated feature. Though the story does not end here for Quirino Cristiani. He kept moving, took his films on a roadshow, showed kids how to make stop motion, and made some more movies. In 1931, he made a semi-sequel to El Apostol called Peludopolis. This one is about YRIGOYEN as a ship captain fighting off radical sharks, an obvious allegory for how he was deposed at the end of his second term. Peludopolis took El Apostol one step further also, as this was the first animated feature with sound. A fully pressed soundtrack was made for this movie, and both were lost in two studio fires, in 1958 and 1961. Cristiani is one of the rare cases of someone who had it all and lost it all twice. But he didn't seem to care. You see, Cristiani had already retired by 1941, and he lived to see all his work destroyed. With only one copy each of all his works, it seems he wasn't thinking about the long-term effects of his legacy. Cristiani did meet Walt Disney during Disney's peace mission to South America. It is most likely Walt saw Peludopolis with him, and was impressed with Cristiani's sense of humor and vision. Despite being offered a job, Cristiani refused, probably still wanted to march the beat of his own drum, perhaps avoiding another fiasco like with El Apostol. I don't know if he met Lotte Reiniger. A small part of me wonders what animation would be like if this film still existed. Argentina is not a major player on the animation stage, but at one point, it was. Cristiani was a true innovator and humorist. His eye for detail and signature humor were captivating, and his vision ahead of its time. When the technology was still in its experimental stage, Cristiani added politics, a storyline, and wit to his movie. Perhaps a broader viewing could have inspired many a young animator to pick up a pen and try the same. Animation would serve a greater role in speaking truth to power, bringing down the big man, with El Apostol in greater circulation, the potential for animation as a distortion of real life and a mirror to actual issues in a human way, could have been more realized, though animation never went that way, as El Apostol has been lost to time. Now El Apostol is relegated to a footnote, a historical gotcha for people who still think Snow White was the first. With no viewable copies, there is nothing to be gained from the notion someone beat Disney and Reiniger to the punch. The idea of the movie itself is also dated, since YRIGOYEN had been dead for years, his party is no longer relevant, and the satire relevant only in Argentina during his administration. All humor would be lost unless you were a Latin American history nerd. There is no bounty on the film because it is so old, and with the Argentinian government being what it was, the likelihood of a surviving copy is almost zero. Even if we do somehow find a copy of El Apostol, it would likely have no merit outside of history. Maybe this is why Snow White and to a somewhat lesser extent Prince Ahmed are easier fallbacks. People at least can still enjoy those. They still hold up in several regards, such as drawing you in with emotion and capturing the timeless feel of a fairy tale. El Apostol was a product of its time, a time long gone, just like the film itself is now gone. It is quite tragic, really. Cristiani was among the biggest game changers in animation. He made the first animated feature and the first animated sound feature, while other animators were still making motion comics. It just seems so mind-boggling how an immigrant to a country without a developed industry at the time and with little experience making long-form media was the one to pull off the animated feature. Though even in his own time, he got no credit for his accomplishments, and because of the ephemerality of silent film, his work is forgotten. Nobody alive today has seen this movie. Walt Disney and likely Lotte Reiniger never saw it either. A few scant production stills and newspaper reviews are the only indication it even existed. Cristiani is the ultimate unsung hero in animation. There are some conspiracy theories as to how Cristiani could become the victim of 3 studio fires in rapid succession. While the Argentinian government did destroy his second film, Sin Dejar Rastros, the sad thing is this is not extraordinary. It was the norm for the day. Old films were printed on silver nitrate, which decays rapidly and is flammable if exposed to heat or light. Studio fires were commonplace, and upwards of 80% of all silent films are lost due to sheer negligence. As film preservation was not taken as seriously before home media, most prints of movies were just burned away, and no backup copies were made. Cristiani knew this, and he still made movies anyway. This is what makes lost media so fascinating. It's never just about the media. When nothing is there, it is the art, the history, the background, and the producers involved who tell the story. A simple look at Argentinian animation went down the rabbit hole of World War I politics and a story of immigration. With a void in our animation knowledge, we still have a story to tell, and it's the stories which keep the memory of Cristiani and countless others like him alive. All art will become lost, as the world only has use for it as long as the human race can preserve it, and nothing is forever. But that doesn't mean we should not still make the art we want, because even if it fades away, we can at least enjoy it while we have it, and it can still leave a legacy, even in its absence.